In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, and that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you pardon for my sins, and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Today, I would like to invite you to reflect with me on a beautiful passage in the Gospel when the Lord Jesus fed 5,000 people with barely 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. This event took place in Galilee on the northern shore of the lake near a place that we now call Tabgha, the mount of the multiplication of the loaves and the fish. If you had had the blessing of visiting the Holy Land, you might remember that quiet, humble church built over the site, adorned with mosaics of bread and fish. And let me read to you the exact text. The Gospel of St. John tells the story like this. Jesus went up the mountain and sat there with his disciples. When he looked up, he saw a large crowd coming toward him. And he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" And he said this to test him, for the Lord himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have even a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many people?" And Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." So they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then the Lord took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were seated, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over, so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that were left by those who had eaten. Now notice how the story begins. Jesus turns to Philip and asks him, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" And the Gospel adds this detail. Jesus said this to test Philip. What does that mean? Of course, the Lord did not want to mock Philip. Did he want to embarrass him? No. The test is never to shame us. It is to draw something deeper from within us. Imagine a classroom setting, the teacher giving a test to her students. The test is not meant to humiliate the pupils, but to help them discover what they have learned and what they have not yet understood and where they need to grow. Well, in the same way, that is just a simple comparison. In the same way, when the Lord tests us, it is to reveal the truth of our heart and to make our faith stronger. Now back to the Gospel, when Jesus asked Philip where they could buy bread for the crowd. The Gospel tells us that he knew what he was going to do. That's important detail. He was simply testing Philip's faith. In the same way, our lives are filled with moments when God seems absent, distant, silent, slow to respond to our prayers, right? It may have happened to you many times. Yet these are not signs of the absence of God, but rather His silence is a kind of test to help you grow in your faith because the Lord already knows what He's going to do with your problems. He knows best. In Spanish, they say, Dios sabe más. He knows what is best. God knows the outcome. He already knows the plan. Our part, your part, is to wait patiently, to trust Him, and to hold on in faith, confident that the Lord is never caught off guard, and that there's nothing that surprises the Lord. No, nothing. And that his timing is always perfect. And so Philip responds in the way most of us would in that situation, rather practical. Philip calculates 200 days' wages would not be enough to give each of them even a little. His answer is reasonable, logical, shall we say, but it is also a very human outlook, very limited. He is calculating with human resources alone. He forgets who is standing in front of him, the Lord of heaven and earth. Perhaps, we catch ourselves sometimes saying those words silently. Lord, I try to pray, but I fall asleep. I take up the rosary, but my mind drifts away. I go to Mass, but my thoughts scatter. I want to do good, but my efforts are so small, so weak, so inconsistent. I work hard, but I don't earn enough to support my family. I set goals, but I stumble before I reach them. I try to be patient, but I lose my temper. I want to love, but I so often turn in on myself. I get annoyed. I want to be faithful, but I'm unsteady. I hope to be generous, but I cling to what is mine. I long to serve you, Lord, but I serve myself instead. I desire sanctity, but I see only my failures. And what does the Lord say? That is enough. If you are earnest, give me what you have. It doesn't matter if it's only 5 loaves and 2 fish. It doesn't matter if it's only 10 minutes of distracted prayer, if you have tried your best. It doesn't matter if it's just a small act of kindness when you wish you could do more. What matters is that it is sincere, that is given with all your heart. Because when you place it in the hands of Jesus, he multiplies it beyond what you could imagine. Mother Teresa of Calcutta used to say, we are not called to be successful, but to be faithful. There's a lot of wisdom in these words. When I was living in New York, I stayed with someone who was already 88 years old and in need of care. He required attention to make sure that he didn't fall, that he would eat well, and that he took his medicines. A therapist caregiver would come 3 times a week, but on the other days, we, the residents, would take turn to look after him. I remember one occasion when the therapist told me, Father, try to make sure that he walks at least 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. Even if it is slow, it's important for his circulation. And it's okay to kind of encourage him firmly sometimes because he can do it. So I would help him with that. And most of the time, he managed to meet that goal. But I also remember one day when I saw him weak, tired, and indisposed. He tried to walk, but after only 3 minutes, he stopped, panting and out of breath. And he said to me, I can't go on. Well, I didn't force him that time because I sensed that that was all that he could do. That was his limit for the day. And I realized, even though it fell short of the goal, those 3 minutes were not useless. They still meant something. Well, in a similar way, our dealings with God are like this. Sometimes we can give him only so much, a very little, even though we tried our best. But even when it's small, if it is all that we can offer at that moment, the Lord accepts it with love. It is never wasted. The Lord doesn't ask you to solve the hunger of 5,000 people, but he asks you to give the little that you have, and he will take care of the rest. Think of the boy. He could have kept his lunch to himself. He could have said, well, this is mine. It's not much, but at least it will feed me. He gave it up. And because of his generosity, the whole crowd was fed. Your small yes, that positive step, may seem insignificant, but when it is given to Christ, it can feed multitudes. The miracle of the multiplication of the loaves reminds us of something very simple, but very deep and profoundly meaningful. The Lord multiplies the little that we have, but only when we are willing to place it in His hands. The apostles looked at the situation and saw scarcity. 5 barley loaves and 2 fish as against 5,000 people. Not enough, impossible, hopeless. And we often say the same things in our own lives. We look at our resources, our bank account, our strength, our foreseeable expenses, the bills, our strength, our future, and we say, it's not enough. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I'm not healthy. I don't have kind of medical or financial security. And so what do? We try to control everything ourselves. We want our security to rest only on what we can calculate, what we can produce, what we can save. We measure our life by bank accounts, by health checkups, by career success. But when things don't go the way we planned, what happens? We are consumed by worry. Our hearts are restless. We are not able to sleep, to concentrate, to pray. We run through endless questions. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if I can't pay the bills? What if the business fails? What if I'm alone when I grow old and nobody cares for me? So many ifs and conditionals. Those are signs of a heart that has forgotten one thing: God is with you. In mathematical terms, remember your elementary math, we are, shall we say, the multiplicand, a very small number. Let's say we are 5. By ourselves, the multiplicand stays 5, limited, small, insufficient. But Jesus is the multiplier. His power is not small, but beyond measure. When the multiplier is great value, let's say 20,000, even the smallest multiplicand becomes abundant. 5 by the multiplier 20,000 becomes 100,000, right? Simple math. What was little now becomes overflowing. And here's the key: we cannot be zero. 0 multiplied even by infinity is still 0. We must offer something to the Lord, even if it is just 1, even if it is just 2. So the 5 loaves and 2 fish placed in the hands of the Lord became a banquet for thousands. In fact, there was an excess. And so transpose that in a spiritual plane: the multiplicand, weak, limited, inconsistent, but not 0. We give the little that we have. Jesus is the multiplier: infinite mercy, infinite love, infinite patience, infinite power to transform. And the product is abundance, blessings, graces, conversion, fruitfulness, beyond what you could ever imagine. It's not just for yourself, in fact, but you begin to do good to others. As long as we are not 0, again, I insist on that idea, as long as we are not 0, as long as we place even the smallest gift in His hands, He multiplies it into abundance. Even if you are just in bedridden because you are sick, you couldn't really do anything. You cannot even stand up to get a glass of water. But make an act of contrition, make an act of humility, make an act of faith. And that is a multiplicand. It's not 0. You're doing something. And the Lord will bless you. We must give Him what we have earnestly, with all sincerity. If the boy in the gospel had kept his bread and fish to himself, there would not have been miracle. But he had to let go. He had to surrender his little portion and place it in the hands of Jesus. Then, and only then, the multiplication came. And this is where faith enters, to believe that my security is not based only on my own calculations, but on God's providence, to trust that He knows what I need, to rest in the conviction that my life is not a series of disasters waiting to happen, but a story guided by God's love. So today, perhaps we can bring to mind, ask ourselves, what are my 5 loaves and 2 fish? What is small in my life? What feels insufficient? What is the little that I can offer to God? Give it to Him. The Lord is not asking for perfection. He asks for sincerity. And once you surrender, you will see that He multiplies. He provides. He fills not only your need, but the needs of many others through you. In real life, it could mean, we ask only for relief from pain, but God grants complete healing. We hope for just enough to pay the bills, but God sends us a much higher paying job. We make time for a short prayer, and God floods our hearts with consolation and renewed strength. We chat casually with someone about faith, and you're surprised that God steers in that person to respond to a vocation. We offer a small donation, and God uses it to feed a family for weeks or inspire others to give. We give a smile or a kind word, and God uses it to lift someone from hopelessness and despair. We forgive others. We forgive one offense, and God begins a chain of reconciliation that heals an entire family. Remember also what the disciples first suggested. Send them away, dismiss them. Let them find food for themselves. That is a temptation of avoidance, and it is so human. When a problem seems too big, we run away. When a burden seems too heavy, we try to escape. When responsibility is placed upon us, we try to pass it on to someone else. But Jesus refuses to let them dismiss the crowd. Give them some food yourselves. And that's what He tells us. Don't turn your back on the needs of your family, your friends. Don't dismiss the hungry, the lonely, the broken. Don't say that's someone else's problem. The Lord is inviting you to face the need and to trust that with Him you can do something about it. Have you ever organized a party or a dinner at home? And you start counting the guests, calculating the budget, and suddenly that little voice inside begins to whisper, oh no, what if I don't have enough? What if too many people would show up? What if the food runs out? And then someone suggests a very practical idea. Why don't we just make it potluck? Everyone brings something, and suddenly the burden isn't on you alone. It's a very human way of solving a very real problem. Well, today, with WhatsApp or Viber, you can even create a group chat to coordinate things, just to make sure that you don't end up with 12 trays of spaghetti and nothing else. So there's a variety, distribution. But here's something interesting. Sometimes pride gets in the way. We don't want to appear as if we need help. We think, oh no, I want to show everyone that I can provide everything myself. I don't want to look poor or dependent or incapable. And so we stress ourselves out, forcing ourselves to do it all. And in reality, that's not generosity. That's pride in disguise. And yet when we let go of that pride and allows others to contribute, what happens? More often than not, there is an overabundance. Everyone brings something. And suddenly you have far more than enough. After the party, you're not worried about scarcity anymore. You're worried about what to do with all the leftovers. People are taking food home in containers. Your fridge is overflowing. And you end up with meals for the next 7 days. Just heat it up in the microwave. It's funny. But it's also a picture of God's providence. When we rely on ourselves alone, the best that we can produce is anxiety. That's for sure. But when we open our hands, when we allow God and even others to take part, there is abundance and even superabundance. And that's the same lesson of the 5 loaves and 2 fish. We think it will never be enough, but in God's hands there is always more than sufficient. Plusquam satis, more than what we need. So much so that, like after good potluck, there are baskets and baskets left over. So the miracle unfolds. Jesus takes the loaves, gives thanks, and distributes them. Everyone eats, not just a little, the gospel says. They had as much as they wanted. They were satisfied. And then there were 12 baskets left over. That is the way of God. He doesn't give us only the bare minimum. He gives in abundance. He gives more than what we ask. He gives more than what we need. He satisfies us. And then it overflows. But there's something important to remember. Jesus said, gather the fragments so that nothing may be wasted. Gather the leftovers. 12 baskets were collected. He didn't tell them to throw them away. Anyway, I can always produce more. No, gather. It is an invitation for us not to waste the graces of God, that we should never take lightly His blessings. When God gives, it is overflowing, but we must treasure it. We must guard it and use it well. Think of the graces that you have received in your life. It could be, you have had a good education, you come from a good family, there's an abundance of resources, you're able to travel, to buy the things you want to, and the children are, in good health, well educated. Plus, there's piety, your vocation perhaps, you have friends. These are blessings. Not to waste, not to ignore them. In fact, you do have now the responsibility to share those blessings to other people. So remember, when you feel weak in prayer, distracted, unworthy, sinful, offer that weakness to Christ. And He will take it and He will transform it and purify it. Our job is not to produce the miracle. Our job is to hand over the loaves and the fish. The miracle is His. In a certain sense, it is a blessing that we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. Scarcity, in a way, is a blessing. Why? Because if we had everything, if we had wealth, perfect health, overflowing savings, success in business, comfort and travel, and all the pleasures this world can offer, imagine, then we might be tempted to believe the greatest lie of all, that I do not need the Lord. I don't need to pray, really. I don't think that we have that kind of feeling or sentiment. But unconsciously, when things go well in life, there's a temptation to be self-sufficient and to do it all by ourselves. But when life confronts us with scarcity, with fragility, with limits, something else happens. We discover our poverty. We discover our dependence. And then almost instinctively, we turn to God and we say, Lord, I don't have enough. I cannot do this without you. And that cry, that humility is the opening for grace. Think about it. Think of the gospel episode. If the disciples had a warehouse full of bread, they would never have turned to Jesus. They would have solved the problem on their own. But because they had so little, they had no choice but to place it in His hands and to tell Him that we have a problem, Lord, we have a problem. And it was precisely there, in that weakness, in that scarcity, in that limitation, that the miracle happened. St. Paul says, when I am weak, then I am strong. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10. In other words, when I recognize my weakness, when I embrace my poverty, then God's strength can shine through me. If I am full of myself, there's no room for Him. But when I am empty, When I know my need, then God can fill me to overflowing. So perhaps today, instead of resenting our limitations, we can begin to see them differently. That fragile health, that small paycheck, that hidden insecurity, that lack of talent, they may not be curses. They may be doorways, blessings in disguise. That expression, blessing in disguise. Doorways that lead us to a greater trust, deeper prayer, and stronger faith. Because in the end, it is not about how much we have, it is about what God can do with what little we bring. And in His hands, even our 5 loaves and 2 fish are more than sufficient. Let us remember, though, one thing. As I mentioned, and I insist, that the Lord will do miracles if we offer Him something. St. Augustine said, God who created you without you will not save you without you. He needs your cooperation. Even the mercy of God that is infinite, it requires a minimum of contrition, goodwill, sincere heart. To believe that my security is not based only on my own calculation, but in God's providence. Faith doesn't mean being careless or neglectful or irresponsible. The Lord still calls us to work, to plan, to do our best, to produce the 5 loaves and 2 fish, or maybe just 3 loaves and 1 fish. Whatever we have. Faith means that after doing our part, we entrust the outcome to Him. We say, Lord, this is what I can do. It's not much, but I give it to you. And I trust that you will do the rest. That's always a good rule of thumb. Do everything you can in your power, do your best, humanly speaking, and leave the rest in the hands of God. And there's a similar expression, work as though everything depended on you, and pray as though everything depended on God. Some time ago, I mentioned in one of the meditation, there's a Spanish saying, si quieres hacer reír a Dios, cuéntale tus planes, which means, if you want to make God laugh, tell Him your plans. Because, we don't see the bigger picture. So, let the Lord take the reins. Do your part with all sincerity. Work hard, doing everything with faith. So what does this mean for us? When we are overwhelmed in family life, when the demands seem too great, offer the little patience you have to Jesus, and He will multiply it. When you are discouraged in your work, your apostolate, when the needs of the world seem far beyond what you can address, offer the little effort that you can, and He will multiply it. When you feel weak, distracted, or bored in your spiritual life, in your prayer, in the norms, you feel unworthy, sinful, going to the confession, saying the same things again and again, offer that weakness to Christ, and He will take it, and He will transform it. I invite you to pray, to say a short prayer. Lord Jesus, here I am, with my little loaves and fish. They are small, they are poor, they are weak, but they are all that I have, and I place them in your hands. Multiply them, use them to feed others. Teach me to trust you more deeply, to never run from responsibility, and to treasure the abundance of your grace. Let us conclude, as always, turning to our Blessed Mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary. She shows us this truth most clearly. She offered so little in human terms, just her fiat, word, one phrase. Yes, Lord, let it be done to me according to thy word. And yet God, the great multiplier, made her the mother of His Son, and through her, the whole world received the gift of salvation. And like Mary, we may feel small, but if we place our little offerings, our 5 loaves and 2 fish, into God's hands through Mary, the Lord will multiply them into abundance beyond anything that we can imagine. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put him into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.